Hey guys, Michelle Glass here, and welcome to our fourth episode in our Lecture 1 um, series, Chapter 1 series. And our topic for this presentation is evolution, which is our core theme of biology. So as we are studying this semester, and if you go into Biology 2 next semester, you'll be hearing about this topic repeatedly. So when we talk about evolution, the reason it is our core theme is it does explain the unity and the diversity of life. So as we're talking about organizing our organisms into the different domains, archaea, bacteria, eukarya, we grouped everything that was similar to archaea and bacteria and eukarya, but then we have three different groups because they're very diverse. And then as we looked at the domain eukarya a little bit more, we saw that, we can further say, okay, well, these organisms are similar. Let's put them into this classification called kingdom, but also let's make those kingdoms separate because plants are very different from animals. And so that's what we're talking about here in this presentation. All of our discussion of evolution is supported by lots of different types of data. Remember, as scientists, we always want to make sure that our conclusions and our theories are evidence-based, and so far the data supports evolution. The data includes information coming from the fossil record. Experimentation illustrates evolution, so we have experimental data that supports evolution. DNA analysis, so this is one of the things that all living things have, this molecule DNA as their hereditary molecule, and it does the same thing in the archaea and the bacteria and the fungus and the plants and the animals, but yet it's not identical. And so we can look at relationships between organisms using that DNA analysis. And just observational information has been useful in supporting this theory of evolution. Now, the mechanism of action, meaning how does evolution happen, is described as natural selection. So that's what we're going to look at and talk about a little bit more here. Now, natural selection was, of course, really, Charles Darwin is the person who gets credit for proposing this idea in his book On the Origins of Species, published in 1859. But he wasn't the only person at that time that was thinking about this idea of evolution. So there are others who were contemporaries of his that were also thinking along these same sorts of ideas. Now, Charles Darwin is important because he made two key observations that led him to this description of natural selection. So one observation he made as a naturalist was that there's a lot of individual variation between species. Now, we know that. We can look in our family, and we can look at our friends, and we can look at a classroom, and we can look at a whole school, and we see that humans vary in hair color and skin color and eye color and body shape and height. And, that's just talking about what we look like, not to mention, how our bodies work and the way our voices sound and all of these other ways that humans are individually unique. And you know that too if you're a pet owner, that you can recognize your dog or your cat or your bunny rabbit, right? So that there's individual variation. As a gardener, I see variations between the plants that I have in my garden, even if they're all corn plants. I can see this plant is taller than that plant and so forth, okay? And then the other important observation that was made was Darwin recognized that, there's an overproduction of offspring. Think about the seeds on the dandelion that you blow and then distribute everywhere. There are so many seeds on that single dandelion head. That individual has produced more offspring than will probably survive. There's a maple tree in my backyard, and so you get those huge helicopter seeds dropped all the time, and they keep trying to sprout, but they all don't make it. So that's the other thing here, is that organisms will produce more offspring than will survive, than can actually be supported in that environment. If every single one of those dandelion seeds germinated and produced a dandelion, and then the next generation, they would overcrowd each other, and there would not be room for all of those dandelions. And so what we do is we can take these two pieces of information together. There are lots of offspring. They're not all going to survive, but they're not identical to each other. There are variations that exist in that group. So what determines which organisms survive, which offspring live, and which ones die, right? And so this is where this idea of natural selection comes into play. The idea here is that those offspring that are the most fit for their environment are the ones that are most likely to survive and reproduce. Most fit for their environment are the ones that are most likely to survive and reproduce. And this idea of fit doesn't necessarily mean the meanest or the fastest or the smartest or the most beautiful. It could be the one that hides the best. It could be the one that survives an infection because of the immune system. It could be, any of these characteristics. Whatever it is that allows those individuals to survive and reproduce are considered the most fit characteristics, okay? And so what we're seeing is it's the environment itself that's selecting for what is the most fit, right? So depending on what predators are there, depending on what the environment looks like, depending on whether they can withstand heat or cold, all of these types of things are environmental conditions that are helping to select for what characteristics are the most fit. And so what that also means is if you in any way change the environment, you can change those characteristics that are most fit. And this is an important piece because we know from previous discussion that life is able to respond to its environment and it's able to adapt to its environment. So if we make changes to the environment, hopefully there will be individuals in that population that can still survive and see a population adapt to that new environment. Okay? So again, if you change the environment, you're changing what's desirable. So you have to maintain that individual variation within a population. Otherwise, either everything survives, yay, or everything doesn't, right? Okay, so here's my beautiful example. Stick it over here. Here's my beautiful example. Are you ready for this? This is my beautiful bug called Sweetie Bug. And look at this population of sweetie bugs has two different variations. So sweetie bugs can either be green or they can be orange, right? Okay, now looking at the environment that I've given them, they're living on a green leaf. And so if you're a bird who thinks sweetie bugs are super sweet and tasty and you want to eat them, what sweetie bug are you going to be able to fly around and easily see, pick out, and eat up, right? So you're going to most easily see the orange. So that means that the green variation is the most adapted for this particular green environment. Do you agree? Okay, pretty easy. Now let's say it's fall and the leaf color changes. And so now it's no longer the green leaf, but it's an orange leaf. I kind of jumped ahead. You get this, right? Okay. So here's my orange leaf. Now, which individual is most adapted to the environment? It's switched, right? Now, it wasn't anything about the bugs themselves. It was the environment that changed. And because there was variation in the bug population, there were some individuals who were green and some individuals who were orange. They can adapt. The population can adapt. So what we see here is, of course, those green individuals are going to get eaten because if you're the bird flying by, you can see them now. You gobble them up. They're super sweet and yummy. So you eat everyone you can see. And it's those orange individuals that are now more fit for the environment. And so they're able to survive and reproduce and pass on that orange characteristic to their offspring. And so let's say this wasn't a change in season, but there was a change in the host plant. So now that instead of having green leaves, the plant has orange leaves, you would see a shift in the population where you would get mostly orange sweetie bugs and very few green ones. It's not that the green ones are not being produced. They are being born green, but they're not as fit for the environment, and so they're the ones that are eaten. So what we see is that those individuals who are most fit for their environment, they survive, they reproduce, and they pass those fit characteristics on to their offspring. So it's a populational change that's happening over time, not an individual that's changing itself to adapt to the environment. It's a populational level change. Now, we already knew this. Humans have been manipulating this for millennia. This is the basis of all of our agriculture, whether we're talking about plants or animals. This is the basis of picking out dogs that can be little teacup dogs versus great big Great Dane dogs. You know, we pick out those individuals that have those characteristics we most like, and we breed them for those characteristics. And so those are the characteristics that survive and get passed on to the offspring. And then from that group of offspring, we again pick the one we like the best and we breed that one. That is called artificial selection. But it's the same idea as natural selection. In the case of artificial selection, it's humans that are picking those characteristics that are desirable. So it has nothing to do with survival at that point from a biological survival perspective. It has to do with what we personally like. In the case of natural selection, it's the environment. So it's not, that there is this intelligence behind the selection. Instead, it's this idea of what I've said before. Those characteristics that are most fit are those that survive, reproduce, and pass those characteristics on to their offspring. And that's it.